Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. So in today's video, we're going to be looking at reflection agents and how reflection agents work in LangGraph. So basically, you're going to be looking at the base of reflection agents and when should you use reflection agents, why should you use reflection agents, what are reflection agents in the first place, and how do you code and use reflection agents using LangGraph. So that's all this tutorial is going to be about. If you guys want me to make more videos on reflection, more other types of reflection agents, well, let me know. In this case, I'm only going to cover the basic reflection agent. So let's get started. So these are the things that you're going to be looking at in this video. You're going to look at what is reflection in AI systems. You're going to look at the different three types of reflection agents. There are multiple types of reflection agents. You're going to look at three. You're going to look at the basic reflection agent, which is all this video is all about. You're going to be looking at how to set up and install everything and get running. You're going to look at an overview of a simple reflection agent. Okay. And you're going to look at building different agents. Then you're going to assemble those agents together, creating a cycle using LangGraph to build basically a graph of these agents. And then basically, you're going to see the different use cases where you might use reflection agents, where you might not use reflection agents, and stuff like that. And then finally, we'll run into a conclusion. Okay, so let's get started. So, what is a reflection in AI systems anyway? What's reflection in AI? Okay, so before you start thinking of anything complicated, just pause and think about what is a reflection. What's basically reflection? So let's say that I have a friend John, and John and I had an incident, and I go back home or wherever I'm going to the other day, the same day, and I'm sitting back and looking at what just happened between me and John, and I'm thinking, okay, maybe what I did wasn't so good, or what I did wasn't bad at all, or what I did was good, or what I did was bad, something like that, right? You're basically reflecting and trying to critique your actions that you took previously. That's basically what what reflection, the word reflection can be. And if you can take the same concept and apply it in AI systems, and this is where we get reflection agents. So reflection is just a prompting strategy used to improve the quality and success rate of agents and similar AI systems. So it involves prompting an LLM to reflect and critique its past action, something incorporating additional external information such as tools and other things like that. So basically, you're just having an AI critique its own actions and basically improve on the suggested critics and try to address those criticisms that it came out, it drew from its own past actions. So that's basically what reflection basically is in an AI system. So I really love one of the explanations that I got from the LangChain official documentation. This is one of the things that they say, and I got this diagram from them. So credit to them. So this is what they said about a simple how another way of thinking of reflection agent. So a simple way to understand this is a system one and system two architecture. Okay, so again, credit to the LangChain blog. Okay, so in such an architecture, system one does all the creative and instinctive thinking, while on the other hand, system two does the reflection and reflection parts of the thinking of the system of the architecture. LLMs on the longest time have been playing the role of system one side of doing things, which is just basically they just think fast. They are not they're subconscious, they're automatic, and they can't really do complicated stuff, right? And that's what we have been doing with LLMs for the longest time. So with agents and specifically reflection agents, um, in introducing reflection in prompting, we can usher LLM's application closer to doing system two activities, as you can see on currently on the screen. So system two activities are kind of this like they're more conscious, they're more effortful, they can solve more complex decisions, they are less error prone because they can evaluate whatever they have done and then critique their own actions and then fix those address those criticisms before giving the user the final response. So one of these brings us into uh, the advantage and disadvantages. So let's say system one, which is kind of what we have LLMs for, they're much faster. Like if you go on ChatGPT and ask the question, it just outputs a bunch of results, right? It doesn't really reflect on whatever it's saying. It just outputs a bunch of results. So it's faster. They're subconscious. They are they're not really conscious. They're subconscious. They're automatic. Okay, very fast. They can do everyday decisions and they're error prone. They can make a lot of errors. Like in GPT, sometimes you can write Python code and they just give you the code. It didn't run the code, or I don't know. I don't know if it runs the code in the background, but sometimes if it was running the code, you wouldn't get the errors that you get most of the time, right? So it's really not criticizing whatever it's doing. So that's one of the disadvantages of using system one kind of thinking for LLM application, which is most applications are currently based on. So system two the way of doing things is by using reflection and then ushering the system one way of thinking of LLMs into system two, whereby okay, because they have to reflect on their own actions, they're much slower. But they're not, now they're more conscious of the actions what they're doing, right? Because if you ask it to write code, it write the code, test the code, and then fix the errors that it gets, right? So it's more conscious of whatever code is writing. It's more effortful, right? They can do more complicated tasks other than the system one way of LLMs, and also they are more reliable because they don't just give you an output, they critique the output that they generate, test it around before giving you a final output, so they are more reliable. So let's look at three types of reflection agents. So the basic reflection agents, there also we have reflection agents, we have language, another is called language agent research, which is LATS, which is really really good architecture as well. So in this case, you're going to only focus on the basic reflection agent. So let's get into it. So what is a basic reflection agent? So as the name suggests, this is the most basic form of reflection agents. In this setup, we have two main LLM agents. So one is acting as the generator, and the other one is acting as the reflector, which is basically reflecting and criticizing or giving critiques on what the generator is outputting. So generator outputs some things, and then the reflector looks upon those things and then critiques whatever the generator has generated and give it feedback that it can use, constructive feedback that it can use to improve its output, right? So that's basically the architecture we have. So the human gets in an input, the input goes into the generator, generator generates an initial response, the reflector agent reflects on this response, and then gives a bunch of critiques and things that it can do to improve whatever it has, improve the initial response. This goes back to generator. The generator generates a new response, taking into account the critics that it got from the reflector, and then you works on those critics and generate another response. And then the reflector looks at it again, and then we go into this loop, right? We run into this loop, and you can set the number of times this loop runs before you generate a final output, which goes then to the user, right? So that's basically what a basic reflection agent is. So now let's go ahead and actually begin to set up the environment so we can begin to code out one of these reflection agents. So I'm going to go into my terminal right here. So once I'm inside of my terminal, I'm going to use poetry, and I'm going to use a list of commands, and I'm going to use these commands right here. And you can just pause the video and write these commands. I'm going to be using poetry. If you don't have poetry, feel free to use a normal Python VENV environment if you want to. But I'm going to be using poetry, so you can install poetry. It's easier to install. You can always find the poetry documentation and install poetry. So let's get started. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new environment. So I'm going to say poetry new. I'm going to call it reflection underscore agents, and I'm going to have a section within it. I'm going to call this section. Let me see. I can call it sections, just like that. So create that environment. And once this environment is created, I'm going to change directory into my folder, which is called reflection agents, right there. So once I'm in there, I have this instead of my environment. Good. So once I have this in there, I'm going to go ahead and install a couple of libraries. So I'm going to install LangChain, LangGraph, and Python decouple. Okay, so I'm going to go and say poetry add LangChain, LangGraph, and I'm also going to install Python decouple, just like that. Okay, so LangChain, we're going to use LangChain. There's no LangChain. You're going to use LangGraph, which is going to enable us to construct a graph and create a cycle between our different agents to enable them to perform reflection. And then you're going to have Python decouple that you're going to use to read our virtual environments, right? Our environment variables. Again, I'm going to use the OpenAI API key, and I'm going to keep that instead of my environment variable. That's the reason why I have the Python decouple library installed. So if you don't have it installed, kindly go ahead and make sure that you have it installed. And this is going to enable us to read Python decouple is going to enable us to read the values out of that .env file that you're going to create just in a second. Okay, so let's go ahead and see what else. Again, you might need to run the last command in this part, which the last command is config virtual envs.in project hyphen true in hyphen project and then true. So this is going to enable us to create a virtual to create a .env file folder instead of our project directory, so that our editor, whatever editor that you're using, is going to be able to see this environment and be able to recognize the libraries that you're using, so it does not highlight any of the libraries or any of the operations saying that, hey, this library is not installed, so that it's easier to work with. You also get auto suggestions and auto completes, right? Okay, so I already have this run. You already have to run this command once you have poetry installed. I already ran that, so I'm good to go. But in your case, if you haven't run it, just run it and just make sure that it's there. Okay, so if I do an ls hyphen la, you can see I have a .env folder right here. This is the folder that I'm talking about. Good. So I'm going to go ahead and use VS Code. Again, feel free to use any editor that you're comfortable working with. Sublime, Atom, anything that you're PyCharm. I'm going to be using VS Code. I'm just comfortable with VS Code. So once VS Code opens up, we are good to go. So let me just go ahead and try to reshuffle this a bit. So I'm going to go ahead and put it right here. Good. Okay. So if I navigate into my my VNV folder, I can see it right there. So let me just check a couple of things. Okay. So I make sure that my computer is in performance mode so that I get really fast performance, right? Okay. So once I have this done, let's go ahead and see what's next on the list. So, and we're going to look at an overview of a simple reflection agent. So I have this code on my GitHub, and I'm not gonna go ahead and spend a lot of time typing this all out, but basically you can see it right here. This is it right here. So what basically this does is create a simple agent for us. So I'm gonna go ahead and copy this code. Okay, this code is really not what you are really. It's just an overview, and I don't want you to spend a lot of time uh, going over it, typing out all that code. So I'm just gonna copy it and paste and then explain to you a bunch of fundamental things, and then we'll begin to actual code. So I'm going to call this one is gonna be a reflection underscore agent. And then you're going to go in there, create a file. I'm going to call it let me just call it basic underscore 01.py. And then once I have that, I'm gonna go ahead and paste in the whatever I've copied from my GitHub. So you can see I have it right here. Good. So once I scroll up here, now we can see you have all the imports that you need right here. We are simply importing a bunch of things right here. I have already in my environment variable. Now I don't have that environment variable, so this is not going to work. So how do we set up this? So I'm going to go in here and then go ahead, click create a file, call it .env. Okay, so call it .env. Make sure it does start with a dot, so it's a kind of like hidden folder. So once you have that file created, you're going to go ahead and say open. This is gonna be apps. So open AI underscore API underscore key, and then equals to, and then finally you go ahead and paste your open AI API key in here. Okay, so let me just go ahead and get my open API key and have it placed in here, and I'll be back recording. So good, I'm back and I have my open API key inside of my environment variable. So this is how you simply read it out. And again, I can show you what is in there because I have my API key in there. I don't want you guys to have access to it. So that's basically how you can load in that using Python config and then simply load in that API key. Again, don't worry about all this code. This is just an overview. I'm going to actually code each thing line by line and explain everything to you. This one, I'm just giving you an overview. Okay. So we have this function right here. And this function simply calls or invokes the OpenAI GPT-3 model, 3.5 turbo model that we have. Okay. And then finally, we have this conditional age, and I'll explain to you what conditional age is just in a second. Then we have a message graph. So what a message graph is just a class that enables us to store messages between agents in basically a list format. And this list format is called a state, and the state is passed through to each LLM call that we pass in the state where the LLM has a whole context of what's going on. Okay. And then in here, we're going to go ahead and create a simple graph. And that's basically this right here. We're adding in a node, a reflection node, a generate node, and we're adding an entry point. Entry point is the generate point, which is right here. So if I go back right here, we have the generate, which is going to be our entry point. And then finally, we add our reflection agent, which is this right here, which are the two LLMs. And then our entry point is a reflection agent. Then we have a conditional age. So what's a conditional age and why should you use a conditional age? Okay, in the basic agent, you're not going to be using a conditional age, but in other successive agents, you're going to be using conditional ages. And that's why I'm explaining to you what a conditional age is. So a conditional age is basically condition, checks for a certain condition, and then decide which route to take. So for example, let's say that we want our LLM to go for 5 different rounds of reflection. So we go for the first round, generates so the first iteration I will be 0, right? Let's say I is 1. We check is in the conditional statement we can check is I less than 5. That's true. So we go in this direction and then generate, reflect on whatever we have done, and then go back, check, and then I will be 2, go until now we reach a point where I is close to like 5, and then we can't go in this direction anymore, and then we simply end and then return the response to the final user, right? So that's basically a conditional age. It's just a condition, checks a certain condition, and basing on the state of that condition, we choose a different route or a different path or a different age inside of our graph. That's basically how it works. So that's basically what a conditional age is right there. And then finally, we're creating an age, which is just a connection between the reflection agent and then the generator agent, which is this one, right? The connection, and age, which is the connection between the generator and then the reflection agent, which is this line right here. Good. So that's basically how it works. And then finally, we compile it, and then you can go ahead and ask a bunch of questions and then print out the response. So this is just an overview. Again, we'll go into the code and we'll go step by step into the code. So let me change that into sections and then to reflection. Okay, then I'm going to say poetry run Python 3. I'm using Python 3. So Python 3, and then we called it base1.py. Okay, and if I run that, now we can see the conversation between the two agents. In this case, it's not going to be okay. It says we don't have this model installed. So let's see from LangGraph. Okay, let me just try to do a poetry. Add LangChain, LangChain underscore open chain. Let me do that, chain underscore open AI. So let's try to install that. I hope that's the name of the library. Yeah, that should go ahead and install it. So once we have this installed, I think we should now go ahead and be able to run this code. So okay, so let's take a bit of time. And once we have this installed, we can clear this, and then let's try to run the code one more time. So run the code. Hopefully everything now runs successfully. So now everything should run fine, and you can see that error should, I think we got a linting error. Now you can see that error is gone because we have the library installed. So you can see now this now will be a conversation between the different agents, but now we're not actually passing anything between the different agents. So basically we have if you're adding a node, we just go ahead and say add node. We have to specify the name of the node and then a callable, a runnable, or a function or a runnable. That's what we pass in here in here. So the name of the node, and then you pass in a runnable. In this case, I'm passing in a function, basically a function call, and that function call is calling the model, is invoking the model within that function call. So that's basically one way you can think of it. Again, don't I'm just giving you an overview. You're going to look at all this in depth, and I'm going to explain to you much more in depth. So let's just wait for this to complete, and let's just see what output we get back. But basically, we're not performing any reflection right here. We're just asking just one of the agents a question, right? Yeah, so you can see we got back an output right here. You can get back a huge output, and you can read through the output and see what all that. So you can see it's a response that we got back, and it's a huge response, right? So you can see now we are not calling any reflection agent or anything like that. It's just one of these agents working. So you can see it's just one of these agents working. I can see any other agents right here. So AI message, and then reflects, and then you can see the output right here. So let's see if I get any response from any of the other uh, models that we have, other agents that we have, basically the reflection agent, and I can't happen to see that in here, right? So you can see this is just from the one of those agents. Yeah, but let's see if you can see anything from the reflection agent in here. Yeah, I only see one from there. I don't know. It can take a bit of time to read through this, but you can see we get back the output right here. So you can see the max token and everything, and then get the AI response and then the title and everything there. So that's basically it. And that's the response that we get back from it. So fine. Well and good. So now that we have this running, you can see another response from here. This is another AI agent, and this is the references, and then passing the bunch of references and other stuff like that. Okay. So you can see it kind of like reflecting on whatever we have so far. Good. And passing the bunch of references as well. So once we have this running, now I'm going to go ahead and I'll show you how we can actually build this agent from scratch and now explain things into depth. So this just gives you an overview of how you have agents, right? Agents, and then create nodes and everything like that. Now you don't have any prompting, nothing like that. So now let's go ahead and actually write this the right way. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to call it basic -i underscore 2.py. Okay. So in here, I'm going to go ahead and have a couple of imports. I'm going to go ahead and say from LangChain, LangChain underscore core dot messages. I'm going to go ahead and import the phone. I'm going to import the human message, and also going to import the system message right here. Okay, so I'm also going to say from decouple again. I'm going to go ahead and load in the decouple. I'm going to go ahead and import config. That's going to help us to read our environment variables from our env file. So config, just like that. So once we have that, I'm going to say from LangChain underscore OpenAI. So LangChain underscore OpenAI, which is this right here. I'm going to go ahead and import chat OpenAI. So import, and it's going to be chat OpenAI, just like that. Okay, good. I'm also going to say from typing, I'm going to go ahead and import a list right here. Good. I'm also going to say from LangGraph, langgraph.co, right? LangChain.co. When so let's say .prompt, I'm going to go ahead and import the following. So I'm going to import chat. This guy is called chat prompt. If I can get this right here, chat prompt. And I'm also going to import the message placeholder. So message placeholder, which is this first right here. Good. So once we have those imported, you're going to go ahead and create basically a prompt, and this prompt is going to be used by the generator to generate a certain response, right? Which is going to be the initial response. In this case, I'm going to show you only how to get the initial responses from the agent, and then you're going to pass in that initial response manually. You're going to do it manually and pass the initial response to the reflection agent to reflect on the initial generated response from the generator. Okay, and then later on, we're going to do all this automatically. You can do it for any number of steps. You're going to use LangGraph for that. So let me just go ahead and actually get this prompt from my GitHub repository, so that you don't have to watch me type all that out. So let me just get that prompt, which is this right here. So I'm gonna copy this right here, and you can find all this code. The link's gonna be in the description of the video. So I'm gonna paste this right here just to save everybody's time. I don't want to waste time uh, just typing this out, right? So you can see we have the prompt right here. We have the system prompt. You are an AI assistant researcher tasked with researching on a variety of topics in a short summary of 5 paragraphs. Generate the best research possible as per user request, right? So if the user provides critiques, respond with a revision of your previous attempt. So basically, if you get a critic, then go ahead and reformat your response to like cater for those critics and solve those critics. That's what basically we have. So I'm going to create an LLM right here, and the LLM is going to be the chat open AI, and I'm going to go ahead and pass in my API key, right? So I'm going to pass in API key, and you're going to say config, and you're going to go ahead and load in the open AI underscore API underscore key, just like that. Good. Good. So once we have that loaded in there, we have that imported as loaded in there. We're going to go ahead and create a generator. So I'm going to say generate, and I'm going to say generate. We're going to say equals to, and it's going to be equals. So we're going to pass in create basically a runnable, creating a pipeline, and then finally pass in using the LangChain expression language, right? So I'm going to use the LangChain expression language right here to create the generator, basically adding the prompt, and then from the prompt you're passing in the LLM, which is just the GPT 3.5 Turbo. Okay, so once that we have that, now let's go ahead and let's get any initial generation from this generator. So we're going to say essay, and the essay you're going to, for now, going to leave it to be basically, let's say essay, let's say, so now that we have that in there, now let's go ahead and basically get an initial response from our generator. So I'm going to call it research. So research, and the research is going to be equals to the following. So I'm going to create a research right here, and I'm going to say request, and the request is going to be equals to the following. So the request is going to be the human message class that we just imported, and in you're going to go ahead and pass in the content, and the content is going to be, let's ask the following. So let's say research, research on climate change, just like that. So we're going to ask it to perform a research on climate change. So once we have that passed in there, what I'm going to go ahead and do now, we're going to go ahead and simply get this out, just stream this out. So we're going to say for chunk in generate dot stream, we're going to stream that onto the terminal, and you're going to go ahead and say pass in the message. You're going to pass in the message key right here, message, and a message is going to be basically these are going to be messages, and a message is going to be the basically the request, at least in passing our request message, which is just what we have in here. So request, just like that. So passing whatever we have in here and passing into that function, and then finally we're going to go ahead and get back the response. I'm going to go ahead and print chunk dot content. For each chunk, we're going to go ahead and print the content of it, and then finally you will say end. Yeah, and then say end, and then end, you're going to end it basically an empty string. So that's basically it. And then finally, you can go ahead and say research, which is what we're going to now store all the researches in here. You're going to go ahead and pass in this research to now our reflector agent to be able to reflect on the whatever has been generated. So that's basically it. So good. So we have chunk and you're getting chunk content in here, and then you're just printing it out and then adding it to incrementing the value of this and then adding it in here. Then later on, you're going to create the reflector agent and pass on this essay or this research to the reflector agent, and the reflector agent is going to reflect on the research and then does the suggest uh, propose a lot of things that can be done to improve the research, right? It's basically going to reflect on the research and then provide critics and constructive criticism that that the generator can use to improve the research that it has carried out. Okay, so once we have this done running, let's go ahead and actually run this and let's see what we get back. So clear the terminal, and I'm going to go ahead. This is going to be basic 2, so 2, and then let's run that. So if you don't have any errors, then this should work perfectly fine. So we should now get back just a simple research in the 5 paragraphs. So let's see what we get back. So you can see climate change refers to and you can see temperature, precision, blah blah. You can see we get back everything back, right? So and wrote for us a conclusion. So this is now what we get back from conducting the research. Now we're going to take the research information, whatever this research that has performed, which is this right here, and we have it stored inside of this variable called research. You're going to now generate now the reflection agent and pass in the research that he has conducted, which is this output right here, which is our initial response, from the LLM. We're going to now pass it into our reflector agent, our reflect agent, which is going to reflect and give us a bunch of reflections and critics. And we're going to pass those critics back to the generator, and the generator is going to work on them, and then the loop carries on, right? So let's go ahead and actually do that. In this case, you're doing this manually. In the other case, in LangChain, whenever we go ahead and build the LangGraph, we actually do this automatically. So let me go ahead and get the prompt section where you're going to generate the reflection agent. So which is this right here. So I'm gonna go ahead and copy all this right here. Okay, copy all that, and again the code is available on the GitHub repository, so you don't have to worry about that. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and paste that in here. So we have it right here, reflection prompt, and then you have the prompt. You are a senior researcher, so now we have the base, the a research assistant, which is the generator, and then we have now the researcher, senior researcher, which has more experience. Okay, so provide detailed recommendation including requests for length, depth, and style etc to an assistant researcher to help improve his research. So that's basically what the prompt is, and let me change this to be his, okay, or his or her research, whatever I think it is. Okay, so once that's fine, and then finally we go ahead and create the reflector agent, and it's going to be using the LangChain expression language. You have the reflection prompt, which is this one right here. You have the LLM, which is what we created above there. And then finally we go ahead and just added this line right here to print something on the screen. And then finally we go ahead and simply give it a band passing now. I'm going to go ahead and pass in now the research. So we're going to say research right here, research, and then we're going to add in the research right here. Good. So once we pass in the research, which is now whatever it has done, the carried out the research on, you're going to pass in as the content. You're going to ask it to critique it and give us a bunch of responses and reflections based on its criticism of the research and the way it can be done to improve, like a constructive criticism, right? So now let's go ahead and actually run this one more time. So now you should run this. We should now get a response from the generator itself. Okay, so the generator is going to generate a bunch of responses. Okay, which is the initial response, and the reflector is going to supply a bunch of criticism. That's basically it. So in there, if you construct the LangGraph using LangGraph, you can now add all this inside of a loop, so you can run and you can specify how many times this loop should go on, and the research gets better at each iteration, right? Good. So once we have that there, we have the now this is not the generator has generated basically the research on climate change, and then you can see now the reflector. So to improve your research on climate change, here are some detailed recommendations. I say depth and breadth. So ensure your research covers a broad range of topics. Blah blah. You can see data and statistics. We have the case studies, the policy analysis, future projections, visual aids. So you can see it's suggested all the things that we can incorporate into our research to make the research better. So it suggested a lot of things like visual aids, case studies, which is not included in here. So if you're working with a typical LLM like if you go on ChatGPT and ask it to carry out a research, you only get something like this, right? But now with a reflection agent, you can reflect on the output and suggest a bunch of things that can be done to make the final output better. Now that you have these criticisms, constructive criticisms, how do we get now these criticisms and pass it back into the generator so the generator can write a new version of its research now incorporating all these criticisms? And that's where we can use LangGraph. Okay, so now let's go ahead and actually create a new section right here. So I'm going to create, I'm going to call it basic underscore 03.py. Let me write 03.py. Okay. So let me just rename that basic 3.py. Okay, so once I have this file created, now I'm going to go ahead and grab everything that you have from here, grab all of it. Okay, copy all of that, go back in here, and then simply add them in here. Good. So once we have them added in here, what you are going to do is you're going to do the following. So basically, you're going to use LangGraph to be able to pass now the criticism back to the generator, and the generator is going to work on those criticisms and give it for us another response, and the response again is going to go ahead and get reflected on. We get a bunch of criticisms, goes back to the generator, fixes criticisms, generates another response, goes in here, and the cycle continues until we reach a certain end value, and then finally we can decide, okay, you know what, this is good. We can return it back to the final the user. Okay. Okay, so let's go into it. And again, this image is just I give credit to the LangChain blog. I got the idea of the image from the official documentation. I didn't want to use the image because of like I don't know what copyright laws that they have on the image, so I created my own version of that specific image. And for this one I have, you can feel free to use it. I don't have any issue with anyone using it. Okay. Okay, good. So let's get started with it. So once I have this done right here, is in file 3, you can see I'm in file 3 right here. Let's go ahead and make sure that we have all the things imported properly. So let's go ahead and import a couple of things. Or no, let's just go ahead and code, and then we'll import the things that we need as we go along. Okay, so let me go ahead and get rid of all this. So we don't need this right here. We don't need that, so get rid of it. We also don't need these responses right here. Okay, so get rid of it. So we have the agent, the reflect agent, and also have the generate agent. Right, good. So we have the reflect agent and also we have the generate agent. So once we have that, we are good to go. Again, let's go ahead and actually build a graph. We don't actually need this right here, but let's leave it for now. We'll come back to it just in a second. But for now, once we have the reflection agent and the generator agent, let's go ahead and construct a graph. And then from the graph, you're going to go ahead and basically uh, add these agents around. So to construct a graph, remember initially I told you right here, we need a runnable or a function, right? So let's go ahead and generate a bunch of nodes that you can use as a function calls into those specific nodes. So each node has a function that you can call. So I'm going to go ahead and say create an asynchronous function right here, a sync function. I'm going to call it generation underscore node. And generation node, you're going to pass in a state, and the state is going to be, you're going to use a sequence, and you need to import sequence from typing, and you're going to pass in a base uh, message in here. So let's go ahead and import these two things right here. So you need a sequence and also a base message. So I'm going to go up here, and I'm going to say from typing, I'm going to go ahead and import the following. So I'm going to say from typing, let me just go ahead and say from typing, I'm going to import list and also sequence, which are the things that we are going to use from typing. So I'm going to import those two. I'm also going to import base message, and you're going to import base message right here. So it's going to be base message right here. Good. So once we have all that done, and we are good to go. So let's go ahead and actually write this function, and let's see what this function is. Basically a generator, basically a node, a function that's going to be used within a node, right? So we're going to say return. You're going to await this function because we're using an asynchronous. We can await this. We're going to say generator dot asynchronously invoke this. So that's what a invoke does. So asynchronously invoke this. You're going to go ahead and pass in a dictionary. You're going to pass in messages, and you're going to have, once you have messages, you're going to go ahead and pass in the state, right? The state will not be a list of messages. So once we have this node created, I want us to create one more node that's going to be used by the reflection. One more function is going to be used by the reflection node. So I'm going to call it reflection underscore node, and then we're going to pass in the pass of messages. We're going to be basically a sequence. We want a sequence of these messages. So a sequence. Let me get the spelling of sequence, right? So sequence. You're going to pass in a base message, so a sequence of base messages. Okay, and then finally, you're going to go ahead and instead of this function, you're going to return a list, and you're going to return a Python list of base messages. So these are just some type hints we are using in Python. If you're not familiar with type hints, I have videos on type hint on the channel. You can always check out those videos. Okay, so let me just minimize this so you guys can see the whole code right here. Okay, so now instead of this, what I want to go and do is just create a, a class map. So I'm going to say this is going to be a class underscore map, and this is going to be a class map. You're going to say equals to, and you're going to say basically the following. So I'm going to say AI, and then finding the human message. It can be a human message type. And I'm going to create another one which is going to be human itself, so human, and then it's going to be the human message. Going to be the AI generated message, so AI message right here. And we need to go ahead and actually import this. So I'm going to go all the way up here, and then finally we're going to import AI message. Good. So once we have that in there, we can go ahead and continue. So we're going to say the first message is just going to be the first message. We're going to consider this message. We're just going to consider this message as from the human himself, right? So we're going to say it will be the original human message or the original human input, right? So we're going to say we can call it translated. So we can say translated equals to, and you're going to say a list right here. You're going to pass in messages. So messages right here, and you're going to go ahead and have in a list right here. And instead of that list, you're going to go ahead and do the following. So you're going to go ahead and say add, and you're going to add in another list right here. And instead of this, you're going to add in the class mapping. So the class underscore map. And then finally, you're going to go ahead and grab the messages from there because the class map is going to be this type right here. We're going to go ahead and add in the message message dot type, and you're going to do this using list comprehension, right? So you're going to do this using a list comprehension. You're going to go ahead and say content is going to be equals to the message dot content, just like that. And you're going to go ahead and do this for message in messages, and then finally pass in from the first message onwards. Okay, we don't want the initial message being included because the initial message is the user request message. We don't want that being passed to the reflector because the reflector is only going to be reflecting on the response is being or whatever that's been generated by the generator, right? The generator node. That's for that reason we are ignoring the first message, which is the user human request message. So that's basically what we have right there. So good, and you can break this down onto multiple lines if you want to. Okay, and then you can just save this and gets formatted. Good. So once we have this done, I'm going to go ahead and say the way to go ahead and get a response. I'm going to say response is going to be equals to await. You're going to go ahead and say reflect agent dot asynchronously invoke this, and then a invoke, and then pass in the phone. So I'm going to go ahead and say simply pass in the list dictionary. Here you can say messages, messages, and then message. You're going to go ahead and say map this to basically the translated. This one right here. Good. So that's basically what you have. And then once we have that, you can go ahead and simply return now this as a human message. So you say return a human message, and then go ahead and simply pass in the content, and the content is going to be equals to the response dot content, just like that. That's it. So good. So once we have this done, we are good to go. So you're saying the human message and content is going to be because this response, you're going to get the content of that specific response. So content right here. Okay, so once we have this done, we are good to go. So now we have the two nodes, the reflection node and also the generate node function that is functions that are going to be called. So now let's go ahead and actually create this actual node. So I'm going to call it we can say builder, and it's going to be equals to the message graph, and then we need to go ahead and import this message graph class. So I'm going to go up here, and you're going to go in here, and you're going to say from LangChain actually from LangGraph from LangGraph dot graph, you're going to go ahead and import a message just like that. Okay, so once I have this message imported, I'm going to call it message graph right here. Let's write it and create an instance of it. So once I have that instance stored in this variable called builder, now I'm going to use this and add to it, which is basically acting as our graph. So you can actually call this graph if you want to, and I see a lot of people calling it graphs, right? So we say graph. You're going to say graph dot add underscore node. So I'm going to add a node to this graph, You're going to add a generator and also generate node, and you're going to give what you're going to call you're going to add in the generate node function that we have defined above there, because in here you pass in the name of the node and then function or a runnable that the node can call. So let's repeat that for now for the reflection agent. So add underscore node, and this is going to be called reflect, and you're going to call the reflect underscore node right here, reflection node. Good. So once we have those two nodes added, now we're going to set an entry point. So graph, and what's going to be our entry point dot add set underscore entry point into our graph. So entry point is going to be called the generate. And why am I setting this as the entry point? Well, let me go back in here. I can explain to you why. This is the entry point into our whole graph. So that's why we are saying the generate is the entry point and also is the exit point for our graph. So generate. Okay. Good. So I hope that makes sense. So once we have that in there, so basically now we have the generate node, we have the reflection node, and how do you enter all this whole cycle? We add enter is through the generate node. Okay. So once we have that there, I'm going to go ahead and define now a conditional loop. We are going to have a conditional statement that's going to control how many, if basically how many times you can run this iteration, or how many cycles you can go instead of this graph. So we can go like I think by default, LangGraph sets is to 5. LangGraph by default sets to 5, but in this case you're going to go for 6, like you're going for 6 rounds. So we're going to say def, and this will be a conditional statement. You can scale it uh, should it continue, right? So should underscore continue. So I see a lot of people calling this should continue for some reason. So I'm going to also use the same name. So I'm going to say list right here, and I'm going to go ahead and say the base underscore message. So base message right here. So once I have this right, this function right here, what you're going to do is that I'm going to check if length of state, basically the number of messages that we have is greater than 6, then you're going to return end. So you're going to return end, and end is a special special node within our graph. So we need to import end, okay, instead of here. So we're going to import end from here. We're going to import end is just a special node instead of our graph. So we're going to import end. You're going to simply return end, which is going to be ending the conclusion, ending the loop, and then returning the final response to the user. Okay. And then if that's not the case, you're going to go ahead and simply return reflect. Okay. So that's basically it. So let me go back in here and let me see if I can find the graph right here again. So good. So we're back here and they're checking from the generator. You go and check the conditional age. Is number of minutes that you have, is it less than 6? If it's not less than 6, you're going to pass on to the reflect agent, and then reflect is going to reflect on it. Now go back in here. I'll message there 2. 2 is less than 6. Continue until we reach 6. Once we reach 6, we reach the end graph at the end node, which is a special node that LangChain LangGraph provides us. Okay, and that's going to return the final response to us. Okay, good. So once we have that, we're going to go ahead and say graph dot add underscore, they're called conditional ages, conditional ages, and I'm going to go ahead and add it right here. So we're going to add a generate. Okay, and this conditional age should be adding it to calling the should continue function. So that's basically, so we're adding it to the we're adding the conditional age is added to the generate node. As you can see, it's connected to generate node. That's why we have the generate function specified right here. Then you have the function right here, which specify whether I should continue or not. And now this is the conditional age. So all this right here is a conditional age, right? Okay. So this conditional age might run or might not run, right? So that's basically what it means by conditional age. So good. Once we have it in there, we're going to add another node. Now we're adding another node. Now we have added a conditional node, right? Conditional age. Now we're going to add another age that's going to which is going to be this line right here, connecting the generate and the reflect agent. So that's a condition. That's a normal age, not a conditional age. So this right here is a conditional age. This right here is just a normal age. Okay, so let's add that age. So we're going to go and say graph dot add underscore age age. Okay. Then finally passing, which will add the reflect agent and the generate agent. That's basically what node we have right there. Okay, good. And then finally, you're going to go graph dot graph is going to, you can call it graph, other people call it app. Let me just call it app. It's equals to graph dot compile, just like that. So we have compiled the graph to get now the final thing that we can run. So once we have this, now we're going to create an asynchronous function. It's going to be called, we can call it stream underscore responses responses, and you're going to go ahead and do that right here. So stream responses, you're going to say async for event in graph dot. Okay, let's actually call it. We call it app, right? App dot a stream, asynchronously stream the responses a stream, and then finally pass in a couple of things into this a stream. So for now, what you're going to do right here, let me just pass right here. So what you're going to do, you're going to go ahead and add in some message in here, which is this thing right here. So I left it open. So let me just grab this from right here and then go in here, and you're going to go ahead and paste it in here. Okay, good. So now I'm going to delete this right here, and I'm going to have only the human message here. So you're going to pass in the human message, and this is going to be a list of messages. So let me add a list right here and make sure that we close off that list. Okay, so let me save that. Okay, so we are passing a list, and it's going to have a human message, a content research on climate change, and that's basically it. So good. So once you have that, you can go ahead and simply print the print event. So print event just like that, and then finally you can keep space. Yeah, you can just print events. Now once we have this, now I'm going to go ahead and import because this is an asynchronous function, and if you ever work with Python, you can't call asynchronous functions just like the way you call other random Python functions. So you can do something like this. You can go ahead and say stream underscore response, stream response. Let me see, stream responses. So copy this and then paste it here. You can just call this function like this, right? This is not going to work because it's an asynchronous function. So to run the synchronous functions in Python, we have the async IO library. So I'm going to go ahead and say import async IO, which is this right here. Good. So once I have async IO imported, I'm going to go down here, and I'm going to say, let me just cut this from here, cut it out, and I'm going to go ahead and say async IO dot run, and then pass in that function call. That's basically what you're doing right here. Okay. So let's say async IO dot run, and then you're passing in this asynchronous function that you want to run. So that's basically it. And once we have this done, we can go ahead and actually run the code. So now we have the whole graph completed with all the conditional edges and everything that we have. So now this should run for 6 times, okay? Okay, roughly 6 times. And then final response will be sent to the final user. Okay, actually exactly 6 times, yeah, 6 times. So once we have this done, let's go ahead and clear the terminal and just run this again. Now this is going to be basic 3 and then run that. So this is just a basic reflection agent. And if you have no error in our code, this should work perfectly fine. And let's see what response we get back. So this might take a bit of time, so just give it a bit of time for this to go through. Yeah, so you can see we got a response from the generator. Generate node, you got this response right here. Generate agent, climate change, blah, blah. So let's see now what the reflect. So the reflect agent responded and just suggested to improve your essay, suggested a bunch of things can lead to a policy. You can see policy, case studies, should include data analysis, literature review, and all that is including a typical research. Right? So you can see now the AI agent should now go back and revise its output. So this is the reflect agent, and let's see if we get any other response from the generate agent. And sometimes it's hard to read these strings right here. So you can see now the generated responded. Yeah, climate change is complex and then improved on its on initial response. So now this should go forth back and forth between these two agents for around 6 times before it's complete. So you can see it right here. The reflect reference say, yeah, your research on climate change provides a comprehensive overview of issues highlighting key areas for further blah blah. You can see to continue improving your essay suggested a bunch of things to do. And then finally, we get by the final response from let's see if I can find which was the last response. Okay, so let me see. It's just sometimes really difficult to read through this. So if I think if I can find a better way of formatting this, uh, it should be way better. So I can see. Let me see which agent responded finally. Then okay, writing style formatting. That's for the reflection agent. And then we have this right here, completion tokens, and then all that goes in there. And let's see which. Let me see. Okay, get another human response right here, and this is from the content. Okay. Let me see which agent responded in here. So you can see you have a bunch of things, and it's really difficult to read at times to see which agent is saying what specifically. So sometimes it's just best to keep like a separator between those finish reason, stop, none. You can see it finished right here. Yeah, so I think I can keep a line or something between these things just to make it more easily readable. Print, and I'm gonna go ahead and just do this. So print a bunch of lines right here, and I'm gonna copy this, paste it twice. So I print two different lines. Okay. So clear this and let's run it again. Again, you don't have to run it. You can see it's running. You can take some time to find out what agent is saying what. For me, I just don't have the time. Okay, so because I'm recording this video, so the best we just keep a line so you differentiate what agent is saying what specifically. And you can see, okay, there's a generator. I can complete it in here. Now let's see what the reflector has to say about what it wrote initially. So this is what you get from a typical ChatGPT, right? Or a typical LLM application. Now the reflection reflect agent now reflected on it, and then they said some things to do to improve this research. And then the generator uh, that took that and then worked on it. So we get back a response, and let's see what we get back now. Now this should be a reflector. Let's see what the reflector says, the reflection agent. So you get responded right here. Your research on climate change provides solid information, blah blah. To further enhance the quality and impact of your work, here are some details, and then personal details. Passing those details to the generator works on it and then returns this. So I think we can improve the prompting of this generator, because it's not taking too much into account because it's just returning the response so sharp. I don't think it's taking into account what the reflector is saying, but yeah, you can see we have the ending right here, and this is now the ending message. This is now all the message that we have right here. Yeah, so you can see everything right here that we have, and you can see this is the final response that we get back. Research on climate change, content, and then finally climate change, blah blah, and it provides us a list of all the things that about climate change, right? So we can provide a list of all the things right here. Yeah, so that's basically it. Yeah, that's basically it. So that's the final response, which consists of everything, all the interactions, right? So and this is now the final response we get from the generator right here. Okay, so you can improve the prompt and force this generator to take into account whatever the reflector agent is saying, and then to improve its research more. Because I don't think like it's really taking into account what it's being really said, right? Because the it's not like the research is improving all the time, or maybe it's because it's a bit limited by I say number of paragraphs to be 5. So you can change that and then have it write. Just give it the freedom to write as much paragraphs as you want. Maybe that it would improve, right? Yeah, so guys, that's all for this video, and I hope you have learned something useful from it. And if you did, one of the easiest ways, so you have looked at the conditional ages, building a graph, and use cases. So let's look at the use cases, and then we'll end up the video. So when should you use basic reflection agent? Now, the first thing I can tell is that it's really slow, right? It's 6 times much more slower than the normal GPT, right? Because the normal GPT just responds fast like this. Now you have to wait for now five other interactions to perform in order to make the reflect on it and make the final output better. So if you're building an application that's speed is really crucial, I wouldn't suggest going with the basic reflection or agent or any other reflection agent. Okay, so it's all good for complex tasks, like for example, writing a research paper, doing all this, right? You need to reflect a reflection agent to be able to reflect properly on this and get the right output. So, right. So it also improves it improves quality of the output. Yeah. So if you're looking for quality over the latency, then I would suggest you use a reflection agent. But if you're really looking for speed, then you can see this is really slow sometimes. Yeah, so that's one of the few things I would suggest on this. Again, you can read more about articles on it, and I also write articles on Medium. You can follow me on Medium as well. I write articles about stuff like this as well. So you can connect with me on different platforms. Again, you can find me on Medium at Prince Cramper. You can find me on YouTube, Code with Prince, which is this channel right here. You can find me on Twitter or aka X at Prince_Cramper, and you can follow me right there on X. And I also post video stuff in there, article stuff also on X, not written articles, just link to articles and link to videos. And you can also interact with me on Medium, on LinkedIn, sorry. If in case you have anything you want to build, any project that you think agent can be helpful to you, and you want to reach out to get any consultation, just having a chat about whatever you want to build, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, or on the X. Yeah, so thank you guys for watching so much. Again, if you enjoyed this, one of the easiest ways you can support the channel is just by liking this video, subscribing to the YouTube channel, or sharing this content with anyone who you think might find it helpful. If you want to support me further, you can buy me coffee. The link to buy me coffee is in the description of the video. That's one of the ways to support the channel, and all that money goes into making much quality videos for you guys. Okay, so thank you guys for watching so much, and I hope you found this helpful. If you want me to make videos on other different types of agents such as LUTs, let me know in the comment section below. I will do my best to get back to you. Thanks for watching, and keep safe. Peace.